Third reading of the European Union Withdrawal No. 6 Bill. Lord Rooker.
My Lords, I beg to move the bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. As many of that opinion will say content, the contrary not content, the contents have it.
My Lords, I beg to move this bill do now pass.
The question is that this bill do now pass.
My Lords, in thinking, obviously, everyone who's been here, it has been the most extraordinary experience, but there are some people not in the chamber, to which I think we also should thank. Clearly, those in the Public Bill Office and the Printed Paper Office that have enabled us to deal with this bill in an unusual way, and they have worked along with the doorkeepers above and beyond, I think, the call of duty. For our side, if I can just be personal for a moment, we've had in our office both Dan Stevens on the content and Ben Kaufman keeping our whips together. I know that was bad news for those of you moving amendments, that he's so effective, but from our side it was great. So I'd like to use this moment to thank them. Clearly the work of my noble friends, Baroness Smith and Lord Goldsmith, have been superb over it, and I think the whole House will thank them for what they've been able to do. We thank the Minister, of course, and we're, I think, due to hear from him now.
My Lord, I would just like to second everything that the noble lady Baroness Hayter has said, and just to add my own thanks to all those who have cooperated so well to ensure this bill has been successful, especially the noble Lord Rooker. And I would like to thank my own leader, noble Lord Newby, and my Chief Whip, Lord Stoneham. And I think we've had excellent experience in the passage of this bill.
On behalf of these benches, I'd like to associate myself with the remarks by both of the noble baronesses and pay tribute to the many cross-benchers who have been present throughout these proceedings. To whom I'm particularly grateful. Very cross.
My Lords, can I first of all add my thanks to those expressed by Baroness Hayter and the others, to the staff of the House who have worked incredibly long hours, including quite late last night, to process all of the different stages, amendments, etc. Let me also personally pay particular tribute to my own officials who've also worked extremely late, particularly the legal ones who've had the impossible job of explaining complicated legal constructs to me, a simple engineer, so that I can hopefully communicate them to the House. They have done a sterling job, and I am incredibly grateful. My Lords, the Government cannot support this bill. I quite agree with the point made by the noble Lord Viscount Trenchard that this bill brings delay and uncertainty. I would add that it undermines our efforts to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, and aims to tie the Prime Minister's hands when he is seeking to secure the best possible Brexit deal. However, as I reiterated to the House yesterday, and in line with the assurances made by the Chief Whips in both Houses, if this bill completes its remaining stages, it is the Government's intention that it will be ready to be presented for royal assent. Now, I hope it will be helpful to the House if I respond directly to some of the points that were raised by noble lords earlier throughout the discussion. And I, of course, do recognise that we are now at the third reading stage, so I hope noble lords will forgive me if I take some time to address some of the points. I think some people might want some answers to some of the questions that have been asked, particularly about the Government's intentions.
It's not third reading. It's only... If it may help the noble lord, the only sort of dissent there was that we are not at the third reading stage. We are now on the part this bill do now pass.
Apologise. Maybe the legal officials didn't explain it to me clearly enough. But, so I thank the noble lady for her clarification. My noble friends Baroness McIntosh of Pickering and Viscount Hailsham raised concerns about whether the Government would request an extension but then vote against an extension in the European Council. Let me reiterate, for the sake of, again, the many times we have stated this, but the Government have been clear that we will, of course, adhere to the law. Noble Lords have the text of Clause 1(4) in front of them, and they can see what it requires. The Noble Lords Baroness Deach, Lord Forsyth of Drumlene, Lord Lee of Hurley and Baroness Faulkner of Margravine have raised the prospect that the extension could come with conditions. Noble Lords are well aware of my position, which is that the bill, of course, hands powers to the European Union, and it is true that the bill, as drafted, makes no...
I'm most grateful to my noble friend for answering a slightly different question to the one that I put. But the answer I think he would wish to give is, as I understand the legal position, as I think it was the noble Lord Kerr explained earlier, the UK government will actually not be present in the room when which was the actual question that I put, that the United Kingdom will not actually veto its own application for an extension. But he would just like to confirm, possibly for the record, that the United Kingdom government will not actually be in the room when the vote is taken. So the situation I asked him to elucidate on would not actually arise.
I thank the noble lady for her question, but she has had the answer that I'm going to give her on this subject. The government will abide by the law, and noble lords have the text of the relevant clause in front of them. And lots of great legal minds can no doubt spend a lot of time advising noble lords of the legal intent of it. As I said, noble Lord Baroness Deach, Lord Forsyth, Lord Lee of Hurley and Baroness Faulkner raised the prospect that the extension could come with conditions. And noble lords do know my position, which is that the bill hands power to the European Union. And it is true that the bill, as drafted, makes no provision for the event that the EU attaches conditions to that extension. However, during any extension, the UK would remain a member state. Baroness Ludford noted that Article 50 does not give the EU any special power to impose conditions which would cut across those member states' rights. The most important point, however, is that an extension is objectionable in itself because it delays the point at which we can satisfy the will of the people as expressed in the referendum. Now, whilst the previous extension that was agreed in April contained political statements reflecting the EU's expectations of how the UK might act during the extension period, noble lords, having no doubt studied the decision of the European Council at some length, will note that these sat outside the central legally operative provisions of that decision and did not amount to conditions. The phrase quotes, "This extension excludes any reopening of the withdrawal agreement," close quotes, sits in the preamble, not in the decision itself. And that difference is important because it means that this is not a legally binding condition. And of course, it is precisely because there is a difference that the government has been able to reopen the negotiations and is seeking, as noble lords are aware, to remove the undemocratic Northern Ireland backstop. Excuse me. The noble lords Viscount Trenchard and Baroness Deach asked what happens if the EU offers a longer extension when the Commons is not sitting for the next 2 days. Would it be unable to reject it? As a matter of fact, as drafted, the legislation means that the House of Commons cannot reject a longer extension if it is not sitting. The only way to rule out an unacceptably long extension, of course, is to reject the bill, which is why we have opposed it. Finally, my noble friend Lord Forsyth raised questions about the Kinnock Amendment. The House has taken a decision on this, but let me be clear about the government's position. The amendment is confusingly drafted and is contradictory to the aims of the rest of the bill. It says the purpose of an extension is to pass legislation to implement a deal when, under the bill, the extension is only being sought because there isn't an agreement. The Kinnock Amendment's deficiencies are such that its effect is therefore rendered wholly unclear. My lords, I have detained you long enough. We have... I thought that would get a cheer. We have... touché. We have heard many concerns raised with this bill, but more fundamentally, The issues at play here are not just technical. It is about seriously undermining negotiations that could achieve a deal before the 31st of October, frustrating the referendum result and stopping Brexit.
My Lord, my Lord, my Lord. I shall be genuinely extremely brief. I just want to say that I object strongly both to the bill and the way it's been handled. And I think this is a very, very sad day, both for the country and for our House.
Well, Lords, can I second everything that was said from the two front benches on this side in terms of thanks to everybody. I've just been the messenger from the Commons, really, intervening occasionally because this is unusual circumstances. And I certainly thank everybody who's been involved. I was quite looking forward about 1 a.m. the other day because I'd almost got my second wind. It was just like the old days in the Commons. And then, of course, it all went quiet and packed up. But genuinely, though, thank everybody who's participated. I have to say, we've rewritten the conventions whilst we're doing this, not the least the speech of 7 minutes we've just heard from the Minister. That should have been made as a statement, or the wind-up of second reading. It was completely inappropriate under the standing or the rules of this House to do it under this bill to now pass. Having got that on my chest, because this is not the end. This is our procedures are going to change as a result of this bill for a start. Things are going to happen differently to what they've done in the past. That may be regrettable, it's true, but precedents have been created during the passage of this bill. Some we may come to regret, but I thank everybody who has participated.
Just to remind the House, the question is that...
Well said, Lord.
That this bill do now pass. As many of that opinion will say content. The contrary not content. The contents have it.
My Lords, I beg the House do now adjourn.
That the House do now adjourn.